Welcome to Babes in Bookland, your favorite book club podcast focused on women's stories. I'm your host, Alex Franca. This week, I'm talking with Libby Ward about her memoir, Honest Motherhood. If you picked this one up expecting just another influencer book about how motherhood is hard, put that expectation down, because it's so much more. Libby and I talk about trusting your voice, setting boundaries and actually maintaining them, why writing the book was her seventh layer of hell, and what it really means to let go of the pressure to be everything. Here we go. Hi, Libby. Welcome to Babes in Bookland. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
I have to be honest with you. When I picked up your memoir, Honest Motherhood, I thought I knew what I was getting. I thought I was just getting another influencer memoir about how hard motherhood is, which is great. It's so much more than that. You tell us all that we deserve so much more than survival mode. You ask the harder questions. Why are we still enforcing these conditions on ourselves and each other when no one is actually winning? You pull topics like invisible labor, perfectionism, inherited scripts about what a good mother is into light. Your book gives permission and is a call to action in one. Permission to let go of who we were told to be. Call to action to do that work. Examine the conditioning. Become the mothers we actually want to be, the mothers our children deserve, to live the lives that we all deserve. And you do it with so much humor. So thank you. Thank you, Libby. I really think every mother should read this book.
Well, thank you. I think that's one of the best intros I've had.
Oh,
Thank you so much. Yeah, I even as I was talking about releasing the book, I thought everyone's going to think this is going to be another influencer book, and it absolutely is not.
right.
And my hope is that people would be pleasantly surprised at the depth and the nuance and, many of the things you said, and not disappointed that it was like different. And so far, all the feedback has been good. And so I appreciate you saying that. I put a lot of work into making it the book that it is and trying to weave humor and realness and, talk about all the hard things that aren't talked about in a way that isn't just like hashtag mom life is hard, but in like a real meaningful way with my story. So thank you for saying all of that. I appreciate it.
It was really nice to see some of my own experiences and feelings mirrored in your memoir, and I really loved learning about your personal healing journey. But before we get to all that, you have over 2 million followers on social media. Were there parts of your story that you have been holding back from them that your followers would be really surprised about? Did they know any of this about your childhood growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have been pretty surprised in general about how honest I've been. It's so interesting because for 5 years, my handle was Diary of an Honest Mom. Even now, when I get recognized in public, people say, "You're the honest mom." And I'm like, I'm Libby Ward. And, I rebranded and changed my name. And I'm like, I'm not just the honest mom. So, like, I'm known for being honest. I'm extremely honest in the book. And there's a couple themes that I don't really talk about in detail online that I do share in the book. And the first one is my specific journey with my childhood and my mom and my adult relationship with my mom. And, I make content about being a cycle breaker, about healing, going to therapy, raising my kids differently, but I've never given specifics online about specific things that happened to me, the really, I don't know, I guess like unique ways that my life unfolded growing up with my mom and then in adulthood. And that's definitely a piece that I think people have been surprised by, is how much I share about that. And I had to share it, I felt like, because my whole goal was to sort of bring the reader along on this journey of my own untangling of like, how did I become this strung out, people pleasing, perfectionistic person who is so focused on the shoulds of the world and can't listen to myself? And the answer isn't just as straightforward as, oh, it's childhood trauma, or, oh, it's just society, or it's just this. It really, for me, was an untangling of social pressures and my childhood and different things. And I felt like I couldn't do justice to sharing my own untangling without actually going there. So that, I think, was probably a big surprise. The other piece that I very rarely share about online is my deconstruction journey. So I share in the book that I, started going to church when I was 16 years old, and I really latched onto a church community because it was a place where I felt a sense of belonging and stability, and there was structure. And I moved 18 times before I turned 18 years old. And home life was chaotic, was unpredictable, and I felt like I didn't really have anything to hold on to. And so that's where I ended up, and I became a Christian. And I also became someone who just latched on to every single thing they said without question. And that didn't just play out in the faith world, it played out in my entire motherhood. And when I first started writing the memoir, I thought, I'm not going to include this. It's not necessarily relatable to everyone. It's not every mother's experience. I kind of thought, well, I don't want to alienate certain groups of people by sharing it, whether it's people still, a part of the church or people who have never had church experiences. I don't want to alienate either. And it's such a nuanced topic.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't share it online, is because it's so nuanced that, I mean, have you been on the internet recently? Like talking about religion is
Yeah.
something that I don't want to do online because it would
Yeah.
become my whole platform because there's so much nuance. But as I started writing the story, again, I thought I can't show you how I became who I became without sharing this part of my life. And so, yeah, I take the reader on the journey of like, coming to faith. And then also later in, life and motherhood being like, wait a second, what is actually mine? What do I still believe? What do I not still believe? And how did those early experiences in the church reinforce my need to listen to everybody else and not trust my own gut and not trust my own instincts? How did it reinforce society's messaging that mothers should come last and that our job as women is to care for everybody else and sacrifice ourselves the most, and that the most worthy woman is the most invisible woman? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it really is a untangling that I do in my life and in the book. And those two themes, like with my mom and with religion, were ones that were hard to write and I felt necessary and probably surprised people.
I do think, in a weird way, the more specific someone's story
Yeah.
is to you, the
Yeah.
more that you give yourself permission to explore those
Yeah.
topics for yourself.
Yeah.
So I applaud you. And religion it's a really tricky thing. I think a lot of women our age are kind of like, what was I conditioned to believe? I
Yeah.
think a really important question that we should all ask ourselves is, why do I believe what I believe? No matter what that is,
Yes.
whether it's faith-based
Yeah.
or about society or about different races or about genders, why do I believe that? But that's a really hard question for people to sit down and grapple
Yeah.
with, because once you start untangling, you
Yeah.
realize how big
Yeah.
the ball of yarn is.
Yeah, and once you're honest with yourself about one piece, it just brings the next layer and the next layer and the next layer of, I can't call myself an honest, authentic person
Yeah.
while completely ignoring this huge other elephant in the room. I need to look at all the layers of what built my belief system, not just religious belief system. Like you said, what do I believe about everything and why? And I think some people are afraid of it too, because it seems critical, like, oh, you're only questioning if you don't believe that thing anymore. And it's like, no, just ask yourself why, and maybe you'll confirm, oh, I believe this because of this, and great, like check, let's move on.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll uncover things that you're like, wait a second, I think that maybe came from somewhere that's not mine.
Yeah. How did you get to a place where you were ready to share this story with the world?
I feel like I can't answer that question without first answering why did I start sharing online? Because that's really how it
Yeah.
all began. I mean, prior to 2020, when I joined TikTok, I was someone who didn't talk about the sorts of things I share online. I didn't talk about how hard motherhood was publicly, or even, in large group settings. I didn't talk about shame or, the way I felt judged or pressured to do everything, or being a cycle breaker. I didn't do that online. And I felt really alone in how much I struggled in motherhood. I really thought I was the anomaly in being a cycle breaker. I was surrounded by people with really supportive families, and I thought I'm really the only one. And I thought that I was alone in feeling guilt every day and feeling overstimulated. And when I started sharing online, I realized that not only was I not alone, actually it was the norm. There's so many moms and women who feel overwhelmed, feel like they're not enough, who are living under a cloud of shame and feel like they can't talk about the hard things, and that they're going to be judged if they share the hard things, and or they feel alone in their healing journey. It became this feedback loop of, if I share a little bit and other people say this helps me feel less alone, me too, then I get more confident and I share more. And it became this feedback loop of me then feeling more confident to say different things out loud about motherhood that were difficult. And it was a couple of years in that I started to feel like social media was not enough to do what I wanted to do. I didn't start making content to be an influencer. I'd never heard of the word influencer. I'd never even heard of the word content creator. Small town Canadian
Yeah.
mom who, when I logged on Instagram or Pinterest or Facebook, I felt shame when I saw the way that mothers were living their lives, but I didn't
Yeah.
know that people did it for jobs. I didn't know any of that. And TikTok really was just a fun thing for me in the beginning. And when I started growing followers by the thousands, I didn't even know what that meant. Like I just really,
Yeah.
truly liked connecting with women. But when I realized that there were so many women who were feeling broken, who were burnt out, who were overwhelmed, who felt alone, who didn't have a village, it became my passion in life to change the narrative of motherhood, to start saying like, hey, wait a second, we don't need to come last. In order to be a good mom, you don't need to be selfless. You don't need to be invisible. Like you matter. And why are we feeling guilty for going to the grocery store alone? Why are we feeling guilty for, changing our tampon without an audience? Like why
Yeah.
are we feeling guilty for missing bedtime? And so that became my passion. But there's only so much you can say in a social media caption. There's only so much you can say in a post. And, someone might come to my page and be like, okay, well, on this day, she's talking about the mental load and being the
Mhm.
default parent. The next day, she's talking about the mother wound and her childhood trauma. And then on this day, she's ranting about mom rage. And like none of those things really seem connected. But for me, they've always been connected. In my healing journey and, the therapy I've done and the books I've read and the journey I've gone on to change from someone who completely martyred herself and thought that my whole job was to serve others in life and then felt ashamed for having needs to have a complete transformation, it did take uncovering the societal pressures. It did take unpacking my, religion and my childhood and all of those things. I didn't want just to make people feel seen. Like, yes, I make relatable content. I make funny content or I make
Mhm.
heartfelt content that like touches people. But I changed my life doing all the work that I did on myself. And I wanted to help other moms change their lives and change their perspectives on themselves and who they are and what they're worth and what they're able to do. And social media stopped being like, it limited my ability to pull those threads together. And a book for me made the most sense because I thought I can pull all the nuance together. I can pull all the threads together and lay my story out there in hopes
Mhm.
of doing what I'm trying to do on social media, which is connect with women, help them feel less alone, and help them go, oh, wait, how can I be honest with myself so that I can figure out my next right step?
Yeah.
And so now it felt like the time because the opportunity was there. I just had a lot more to say than a social media caption would let me.
Amen to all that. That's exactly what I do here on the show. It's just about validating and amplifying women's voices and experiences. And
Yeah.
hopefully we can all see something in ourselves and each other. Did someone come to you and say, I would like you to write a book? Okay. And you felt like mentally and emotionally you were on enough of, right? Because it's still, we're always becoming, right? As Michelle Obama famously said. But
Yeah.
you felt you were enough on the other side and you were ready to, you're in a place where you could carve out time for yourself and ready to write this book.
No, no. I mean, so I don't even know if I've shared this on a podcast, but I was originally approached by an agent who, long story short, was not the right fit. And I think probably just saw a number beside my name on social media and thought, oh yeah, this person, I could sell a book deal for this person. And it was clear from the beginning there was not really a lot of alignment with my messaging or the purpose of what I wanted to do. And so I had put a proposal together that I didn't feel great about, and it got pitched. I ended up getting an offer from one of the top five for a low number, and more importantly, for a different book. He wanted me to write something completely different. And I thought, no, that's not the book I want to write. And it was terrifying because, I mean, I've always wanted to write a book. I've always loved writing. I went to school for journalism out of high school. It's always been a dream of mine to write a book, but I didn't know people who wrote books. I didn't know really how that worked. And I had spent the 6 months before being approached by that agent looking into like, how do you get an agent? How do you write a book? And so when that agent landed in my inbox and came to me, I thought, this is my only opportunity. Like this might never come again. There's people who spend their whole lives pitching agents, trying to get someone to represent them, and then to get an offer from a big five. Like, how can you turn it down? But I just was like, I can't do this. It's not the book I want to write. It's not right. And so I turned it down.
Good for you.
Thank you. It was hard because I thought I might never get one again. And
Yeah.
shortly after, another agent reached out. That's now my current agent, who's incredible and was behind like all the messaging of the book. And we crafted the proposal together and, pitched it and got an incredible deal with an incredible publisher. And I was terrified. I'm not a formally trained writer. I haven't done, and I was running a full business as like a content creator. I was still
Yeah.
doing
Oh my
4
gosh.
brand partnerships a week. I was still trying to find a team to support me. I was still trying to figure it all out. I signed
Yeah.
the book deal in 2023, which was, I would say, at the peak of my growth. Like I was just being flooded with inquiries constantly. And so it was terrifying. But at the same time, the whole point of why I do what I do is to get this message out there. I didn't create content to be an influencer. And I thought, well, there's not going to be a perfect time. It's here now. And so I'm going to start writing. It was a long journey in trying to figure out how to make the time, but it wasn't perfectly planned, but it worked out and I wrote the book. So it
Yeah.
was quite the process.
Life is rarely perfectly planned, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did you work with a writing coach or someone that you felt really like you trusted their taste and their opinion to help you on the way?
I mean, it was my first time doing any of this. And it took a little while to find my voice and to find my person and to find my team. I went through a lot of changes. I had a
Yeah.
change in editor. I did hire a book coach who unfortunately had to take on something else 6 months after we started writing. And then I found a different coach and she helped me through right until the end. And so she was amazing. And so I've had different people come in and out and help me through the process. It actually wasn't supposed to be a memoir to begin with. It was supposed to be more of like a social exposition. I thought like, I'll write my take on motherhood.
Mhm.
And I thought in the beginning, I thought, I don't necessarily want to write all of my story, not just because it's really vulnerable, but because I didn't realize the necessity of specificity. I thought, well, my story is not relatable enough. And so I wanted to bring in data and research and other people's stories and my perspectives. And I think it was also a bit of imposter syndrome on my shoulder, a little bit of like, how do real authors do this? Like, how can you sort of prove your
Uh,
point? And
yeah.
it was through the coaching of my editor at Crown who said, your magic is in your storytelling and your voice and the way you tell your story. And I would encourage you to do that. And so she really encouraged me to trust my voice, which the irony is the book is about me learning to trust my voice as a mother and a person, right? That's what the
Yeah.
whole book is
Yeah.
about my ability to trust myself. And I had to learn that lesson all over again in my writing too, through the encouragement of my editor and things. So I had different editors and coaches come along. And the one person I worked with, she said, she would tell me like every other week, writing is a team sport. And I had never heard that before. And that kind of became my mantra that, it's rarely does an author do everything start to finish completely on their own. And
Yeah.
sometimes you just need someone to help you get out of your head a little bit.
Hmm.
I remember someone encouraged me to get a ghostwriter and I was offended. I was like, what? What?
How dare you?
And like, not that there's anything wrong. I know lots of celebrities and influencers do that and they have different reasons for writing books and whatever. Like we all have our reasons, but
Hmm.
I was so important to me to
Yeah.
be the one writing it that I was like, I'm not going to get a ghostwriter. But it was a process figuring out, okay, then what is my voice and how do I write and where do I need feedback and where do I listen to other people's opinions and where do I just block them out and go, nope, I'm going to write the story as I know it.
How did you find the balance in your day to day, being a content creator, being a mom of two, being a wife, being a friend,
Yeah,
being a
that's a great
writer?
question. I failed at it for a really long time, actually. I wouldn't say that I failed at the whole writing process, but I would say that I struggled to balance all the things. I mean, I have raging ADHD. I share this pretty openly. And my ability to perceive time is already messed up. We're talking even when I need to like leave the house to go to the dentist office. My ability to know how long a task is going to take is already broken. And then, like any writer will tell you, there's no way to know like when creative inspiration is going to hit. There's no way to know. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to write 1,000 words each day." It's different and it's in flux. And it was my first book and all the things. And so I struggled. I would say for the first year, I tried to continue to do everything I was doing content wise, making new content every single day, still doing brand partnerships, still doing public speaking, writing new speeches every time I did public speaking. And that reflected in my writing. It wasn't as good. And then I berated myself and I had a really, really hard time for that first year and trying to find a team to support me. And that was really hard. After the first year, after it was actually due, I then was like, I was like, okay, something needs to change. And I completely let go of the expectation that I continue to post daily content, that I run the business, that I, make any money. And I was like, no, I need to give my whole brain to this. And I learned that I needed to be able to give whole sections of I needed to give like whole days or multiple days to it so I could like be in the zone. I learned that that's my process. I couldn't just do like, some writers say like, oh, half an hour every morning before everybody wakes up or an hour. And no, I need to not think about anything else. I call it
Yeah.
my like rubber ball brain. And my husband would know when I'm in rubber ball brain because everything would sort of be like connecting inside. And if people said things to me, it's almost like they bounced off. Like I wouldn't even like really react because I'd be like in my zone and I needed to like be in there for a
Yeah.
good chunk of time. I couldn't just go in and out because then every time I would have to write again, I'd then have to reread everything I wrote before to remember where I was going and what the tone of my voice was and what my mood was and all of
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So it took a while to figure out. And I struggled to be a good friend in that time. I was trying to figure out how to balance everything. And so when it came time to launch the book, I spent some time with my friends being like, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that I have not been here. And thank you for sticking it out with me. And I
Yeah.
promise I'm coming back. Yeah, they were so, so good to me. And, the irony of writing a book where I'm giving women and mothers permission to let go of guilt and to let go of the pressure to be everything and do everything. And also knowing, oh, wait, I haven't actually cooked dinner for my kids in a month and I'm rarely present for dinner because my brain is consumed by this. I had to work really hard at practicing what I preached and finding the balance between, okay, just give it your all now so that you can get it done and then you can get back to just having a little bit more balance versus trying to make sure I'm done by 4:30 p.m. but then possibly losing out on a whole chapter that I have sitting in my brain, And so
Yeah.
it was a hard couple of years writing if I'm perfectly honest. I keep telling people like on the book tour, people would ask me like, must be so exhausting being on the book tour. Like you must be so tired and must be a lot. And I was like, actually writing the book was like the seventh layer of hell.
This is the easy
Writing the
part.
book, that was hard. Like that was deep and hard. And I was re-digging up my trauma and I felt alone
Yes.
and isolated. And honestly, it was really hard to write. Also because I wanted to make it good, right? If I was okay with it just being another influencer book or just being kind of like cutesy and fun, or I don't know, if I didn't put as much into it, I probably wouldn't have felt like the seventh layer of hell, but I really wanted it to be a good book. And so I tell people, no, like the book tour is awesome. Like I feel great. Like I can
Yeah.
just focus on one thing. My one job right now is to promote this book and talk about this book and share the message. And I get to connect with the people I wrote it for. I get to
Yeah.
actually see the faces of women who have followed me for 6 years or just heard of me last week and like hear their stories
Yeah.
and hear how the book is impacting them and be able to connect in real life and, and also like online and like talk about the book. It's just so funny because people would think like, oh, the tour must be exhausting. I'm like, actually, the quiet parts you haven't seen for 2.5 years,
Yeah.
that was really hard for me.
Yeah, the book tour is the gift now for all your
Yeah.
hard work.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I do appreciate that you talk about it being a practice. I loved in your book when you were like, I thought I would go to the therapist and she would bibbity bobbity boo me and I would be fixed. And I was like, oh my God, Libby, we've all been there. You walk into the therapist's office and you're like, all right, here's all my shit. Tell me how to be okay because I don't have time to not be okay
Yeah, like
anymore.
help me get back to spinning the plates. Like that's your job.
Yes.
Your
Yeah.
job is to be like, oh, here's a problem. Here's a band-aid, bibbity bobbity. You're good. Now you can go home, spin the plates, and be happy again and not be this like rage-filled person that you've never met. And that's just not it.
Yeah.
And everything is practice. Everything we do in order to like get better is it's a constant practice of like do it again and do it again and do it again.
Yeah.
And it's kind of freeing to look at it as practice as well, because then there isn't this pressure to make it perfect every time. It's like, no, you're practicing
Yeah.
it, which means you're not going to be perfect and you're going to try again. And then you're going to have to relearn the same lesson you've had to learn a few times before, and that's okay.
It's just like physical exercise. You have days where you feel
Right.
great and you can like lift all the weights, but if you lift weights 5 days in a row, by day five, your muscles are going to be a little bit more tired and you have to give yourself rest, give yourself a break. I think that's been a big unlocking for me is realizing A, every day is a chance to begin again, and
Yeah.
B, we're all just figuring it out as we go and we don't have to get to some like
Yeah.
final perfected
There's no
place.
destination.
There's
And
no
you need to
destination.
like just do it, right? Like I shared in the book about guilt and how I was working through the guilt of taking care of myself and waiting to not feel guilty before I would do the thing. And I actually learned, no, you just have to do it while feeling guilty. And then that is what shows you that you didn't need to feel guilty. And eventually you don't feel the guilt anymore.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with figuring out what is wrong with me. Like,
Yeah.
why am I like this? And I wanted to understand myself. And that did help in the beginning when I truly began to peel back the layers of why am I like this? Why do I respond like this? But in my healing journey, I reached a point where I realized, no, I just need to do the things that a healing person does and a person who wants to be present in her life does, rather than trying to understand, why do I feel like this? How do I solve this problem? How do I control this thing by understanding it? I just need to live in a way that heals my nervous system.
Yeah.
And I say all that to say it was like with writing. I spent a long time trying to figure out, well, how do real writers do it? What is the right process? Like I was researching all the different things that different writers do. And I was trying to figure out the perfect schedule and the perfect way to balance everything and the perfect, words to write in a day or hours to write in a day, or I was trying to just solve the problem with logic and, with thinking through it. And the reality is, I just had to try. I just had to do it. I had to practice. I had to try, writing for a half hour and seeing how that worked. I had to try going into my rubber ball brain. I had to practice all these different ways. And it was only through practicing and trying different things that I found what worked for me. And that's like with all of us. It wasn't like I was practicing to figure out the best way for everyone to do it. I was practicing to figure out what works for my brain and the parallels between that and the messages I share in the book are quite ironic.
It's so beautiful that you share this part of your journey too, because it is just that reminder. If you're doing something you've never done before, you have to figure it out.
Yeah.
How are you supposed to know?
Yeah.
But it is so much more universal than you
Yeah.
think. It's
Yeah.
crazy
Yeah.
how universal it is when we're all, and this is why it's so important that women like you are sharing their stories and being so active on social media in this landscape where, I mean, it's just getting murkier and murkier. Like you're such a bright light. And that's why women flock to you, because they see parts of themselves in your story and in what you're saying. And we're all just like, thank God someone's saying it out loud and still doing it with humor. Let's talk a little bit before we get into the meat of your memoir, the humor throughout your book, because you really do talk about some really hard experiences. How did you find that balance? Did you try to write like a more serious version of everything and then the humor kept
No,
seeping
I
in?
wanted to be
Okay.
funnier. I wanted to be
Okay.
so much funnier. And I mean, the thing is, in my real life, I am just a funny person. Like I
Yeah.
can jump from like dead dad joke to mom trauma. Like I can just jump from one thing to the other. That is just who I am. So whenever people ask me like, how do you weave in the funny? I'm like, I don't know. That's just what I do. Like it's what I do in conversations. It's what I do in the book. And when I started to trust my own voice in writing, I was like, well, I guess I'll do this.
Yeah.
But it was hard because in my content, my humor, when I am being humorous, is often delivered through timing or my body, right? Like I dance and I'm silly and I'm weird, or my facial expressions or my sarcasm. And having that translate into the written word was very hard. Like,
Yeah.
how can I bring in this silliness or this humor or this like jarring, whatever it is, and still have people connect with it and it not be jarring in like a uncomfortable way. I want it to break the tension like any humor does in any serious movie or any, like, I want it to break tension. I don't want it to be like, that's in the wrong place. Wow.
You don't want it to seem like a coping mechanism.
Right, right. Knowing that my humor is part coping mechanism, right? I
Yeah.
mean, tell me about a funny person you've met who doesn't have trauma. They don't
No, it's
exist.
it's the
Like,
sad clown
like,
motif. Like it's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Like
Yeah.
if you're funny, then you have trauma, whether you know it or not. Like that's usually like how it goes. Like bittersweet blessing. I don't really know. Um, but the thing is, it's part of who I am. And also it is strategic because I know that humor opens doors to conversations that we wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
It like lessens the tension around really difficult topics. The last thing I ever want to read is a book from someone who's high up on a hill, who's preaching self-care advice, who's telling you how to live their lives, who think that they're perfect and don't realize that they're their own worst enemy and that they're also messed up as well. Like I really wanted to show people I have learned things. Serious things are true and real, and trauma is real and it affects us. And we can be lighthearted and we can joke and I'm a real person. And because I'm a real person, maybe you'll connect more with me. And if you connect more with me, maybe it'll actually help you to like have the hard stuff sink in a bit more
Yeah.
and make possibly changes in your life or give yourself more grace or whatever it is. And so I loved Side note, for a long time, like any good writer, I was like, this is garbage. This is stupid. This is the worst book that's ever written. I shouldn't, why did they give me a book deal? Like, this is terrible. And I would be so hard on myself. And, eventually I finished it and was like, it's fine. Like, it's pretty good. And it wasn't until months later, like until it published, I was driving somewhere, I don't know, a couple weeks ago to one of my book tour events. And I was like preparing for something. And I was reading a section because I was trying to figure out what I was going to read out loud that night. And I read it and I burst out laughing. And my friend was like, are you actually laughing at your own book? I was like, yes, it's funny. That's
Yes.
a great line. I was like, I'm actually pretty good at this. And she was like, yeah, yeah, you are. I'm like, oh, I think I'm funny. She was like,
Yes.
yes, you are funny, Libby. So yeah, I loved that I was able to incorporate humor and I actually wanted to incorporate more, but I didn't want it just to be another like funny Mom Life is Hard book.
It struck the perfect balance. It really did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
And I love that you owned, look, you clearly worked really hard to figure this book out and to write what was inside of you and your heart and your soul, what you wanted other women to have. And to be proud of that is another thing that we all need to take time to recognize that we should do. So
I
good for you, Libby.
Thank you.
Fuck
Thank
yes.
you. Thank you. I feel my whole journey, I thought I was going on a healing journey to be a better mom to my kids and to not feel broken. My whole healing journey has brought me to this place where I can finally feel proud of myself. I
Mm.
mean, for years, even like as a content creator, a couple of years after I started becoming really viral and getting different opportunities, I remember the first time Disney reached out to send me like on a PR trip and I didn't want to go. I said to my husband, I said, I can't go. There's so many women who don't get to do this. There's so many families who don't get to do this. Like I'm known for talking about the hard things. I can't do this. I feel too guilty. I felt so
Mhm.
bad. And he was like, that's crazy. Like you should be allowed to go and like feel joy. And I couldn't. I would like limit myself from feeling joy because I was so concerned with what everybody else was feeling that I wouldn't even allow myself to feel joy. Or if I did something good, I couldn't feel proud of myself. And it's probably been in like the last I don't know, year or something, different good things have happened to me, not just the book, other things, or I've done things. And I finished it being like, wow, I worked really hard and I did a good job. That's a new experience at 37 years old for me. And it is one that I hope more women can do because we're really good at throwing ourselves under the bus, right? Like as women, we're really good
Yeah.
at like, oh, playing it low. So thank you. And to like anyone listening to this, you should also be proud of yourself and allow yourself to feel joy for the good things.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that too. I think, especially like with what's going on in the world right now, and I'm such an empath, and clearly you
Yeah.
are too. It is hard to find that balance because you do feel like, wait, do I deserve to be happy when so many other
Yeah.
people are just
Yeah.
living nightmare, hellish lives?
Right. And yet to the person next to you, you'd be like, of course you deserve to be happy. If it was literally any other person, you would say that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about your healing journey. Let's talk about your kids and that moment when you sort of realized, okay, I have become somebody that I
hmm
no longer
hmm
want to be. And now what do I do?
I'll try and give you the short version of the lead up to that story. I entered motherhood at 26 years old. And for a lot of people, you'd say, oh my goodness, that's so young. In the circle I was in the rural churchy circle, I was one of the older moms. I was surrounded by women who had babies young and had lots of them. And the whole goal was have lots of babies and be selfless and serve them and raise them well and love them and be patient and kind and all the things. And after growing up in a household where it was chaos a lot of the time, there was a lot of dysregulation, and I was responsible for a lot of things that children should not be responsible for and being parentified and living in chaos, I looked to the women around me and thought, I want to be like you guys. And so I
Yeah.
took on their expectations and not just, women at church. It was, whether it was women I worked with or women online. Like I looked any woman, mother that I saw that seemed to have the secret sauce, that seemed to have whatever this maternal gene is, I thought, okay, we'll do it like that. That's how I should wash my dishes. That's how often I should clean my sheets. That's, oh, we rage clean before company comes over. We,
Mm. Mm.
We breastfeed, we XYZ, fill in the blank. And I tried to be all the things. And with my first, I was pretty much able to do that. I was pretty much able to spin the plates. I'd always been someone who had high capacity and could function well. And I was the mom who like breastfed like in a wrap. So I'd be like breastfeeding while cleaning my house with like muffins baking in the oven. And
Ugh.
I
When
was
I read
like,
that part, I was like, whoa,
oh,
damn,
I was
girl, good for you.
insufferable. I was insufferable. And I wouldn't have said it at the time, but I felt good about the fact that I could be the mom that I thought, well, I never had. Like, oh, all you have to do is love your children and you can be patient and loving and kind and serve them. All it takes is loving them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until my second came along, and it turns out all babies aren't the same. Turns out they're different. And he just didn't love being alive. I joke. But like he didn't like it when I stood and held him or sat or when I laid him down or when he was by himself or when he was with me. He didn't like eating. He didn't like breastfeeding. He didn't like bottle feeding. He didn't like a formula or different nipples. I became wrought with anxiety around feeding him. I felt like I had to force feed him. Sleep wasn't happening.
Your husband, meanwhile, for our listeners, is in the police
Yeah.
academy at this time, where he had
Yeah.
gotten, and he's
Yeah.
working nights. I mean, it
Gosh.
really,
Yeah.
my heart was like pounding for
Yeah.
you as a mom of two,
Yeah.
daughter first. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then,
no, my
yeah.
husband was a police officer and he was gone a lot of the time. He, worked night shifts, day shifts. They were constantly rotating. There was no structure, no continuity. So it was me. Everything was on me. And I was trying to figure out like, what is wrong with my baby? Am I starving him? I have a toddler who still needs me. And I just felt like I couldn't keep up. And then I kept trying to spin all the plates because that's what good moms do. And then I began to just resent everyone in my life and then be angry at myself more than anything for being a mom who didn't enjoy it anymore.
Yeah.
And long story short, I had a little breakdown. I went to therapy, but then I just tried to keep doing it all and doing it all. And it was when my kids turned 3 and 5. And so then my second born, my son, who was highly sensitive and had a difficult time as a baby, turned out to have a very significant speech condition where he couldn't speak. It was a motor speech condition where like he knew the words but they wouldn't come out. So I mean every toddler is frustrated with life, but you take a toddler who can't communicate and it was like times a million.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my parents are divorced. They're both disabled. Neither of them work. Neither of them drive. I feel unendingly responsible for their happiness. And so I am taking my young children by myself to go and help my parents as well. I'm in the sandwich generation, the moment I enter motherhood. And so I took on this role of like, I am the person that everyone can rely on and I am going to do the things. And not only do I want to be a good mom and show up for my kids, patient and regulated, but I want to be seen as a good mom. And I didn't see that at the time, but when I look back now, it's so obvious to me that those are two different things. And the
Yeah.
effort it took to be seen as a good mom was robbing me of the very little capacity I already had for my kids.
Yeah.
And by the time they were 3 and 5, and my son wasn't talking, and I was taking him to multiple speech therapy sessions a week, doing all the practice with him. I was working part-time, going to school part-time, teaching him sign language. My husband had worked a night shift, and then it was the next day I had to go to work and get the kids to daycare and school. And it was just one of those mornings, like if you're mom, those mornings where like literally nothing is going right. And like someone pees the bed, someone starts crying, someone slaps you in the face, like no one's eating their breakfast, no one's getting their boots on. Like it's just a
Yeah.
disaster. And
Yeah.
I can feel the rage and like the building resentment just building, and not just from the day, right? Like from just life. And I was usually pretty good at keeping it inside, even though I could feel it. So I like stuffed it down and stuffed it down, and we eventually got out the door. And I handed them both a granola bar because I was like, "You didn't eat your breakfast, so this is your breakfast. Just give me a minute to make a phone call." And I was trying to make a phone call, and my son started crying, and my daughter started kicking my seat, and he, I think, was signing something, and I couldn't look though because I didn't want to drive into oncoming traffic, and I just feel it building and building, and eventually it just top comes off, and I
Yeah.
slam on the brakes, and I turn around, and I just scream everything that I had kept inside for so long
Yeah.
at them. And when I was done and took a breath, I just remember looking in their faces and seeing fear, like fear that I'd only ever seen about other things, about the room being too dark or a stranger or something else. And to see that fear of me was it was like full body shame that came over
Yeah.
me. And my son handed me his granola bar all crinkled up and he signed open. And I realized, oh, he just wanted me to open his granola bar. And, I apologized and repaired, but I once I got them to daycare and school, I just sat in the car and thought like something has to change. Like
Yeah.
I have become everything I said I never would. Like before motherhood, I wasn't this angry person. I didn't have such a low window of tolerance. And yes, I'm overwhelmed. And yes, it's hard. And yes, it's frustrating and overstimulating, but something has to change because this is not the person I want to be. This is not who I want to be remembered for. This is not how I want to treat my kids. And so what needs to change? And that was, it wasn't the first time I yelled. It wasn't the last time I yelled, but that was one of those
Yeah.
moments that was like, we got to change. Something needs to change.
That was a turning point for you. Getting emotional because it's just like, in whatever degree, like we've all been there where you just like, and then you just get so frustrated with yourself because you're just
Hmm.
like, no, but I'm supposed to know better. I'm supposed to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so hard. Like you love them so much, but it's not easy. It's the most
Yeah.
difficult thing you'll ever do in your life. And I love that you talk about this moment where you also pivot from this question, what's wrong with me, to basically
Hmm.
like, what has happened to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not I'm the monster.
Yeah.
What has gone on in my life
Yeah.
that I've
Yeah.
been conditioned to react this way, to feel like I
Yeah.
have to show the world that I'm a good
Yeah.
mom.
Yeah.
Why do I care so much about that? And I
Yeah.
think that's what really sets your memoir apart too,
Yeah.
and what makes it so strong and so powerful is like I think a reason why a lot of people don't want to do that work is because they do internalize so much of the shame when
Yeah.
really it's we're all
Products of our environment.
exactly. We're all
Yeah.
products of our environment, and so many of those things are out of our control. And the one thing that we can control now is dealing with them, recognizing them, working through them.
And if we can look at them honestly and objectively,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like if we can be honest about why we became the way we became and objectively say like, hey, actually, when XYZ happens when you're a child or when XYZ happens in your life, the natural response for the human brain to protect itself is to develop these coping mechanisms.
Right.
So you don't have these coping mechanisms because you're a bad person or a bad mom or you don't love your children or because you just can't get control of yourself. You have these coping mechanisms because they once served you and it
Yes.
once kept you safe to attune to everybody else in the room and to say yes when your body was saying no and to ignore your gut saying, I don't have the energy for that because it kept somebody else in the room happy and that made you feel like you were still connected and you weren't going to be abandoned.
Yeah.
And you've had childhood experiences and life experiences that made you someone who acts and reacts the way you do. And rather than spending the energy shaming ourselves, maybe we can spend that energy looking at it honestly and objectively and saying, okay, well, if that's true, then what do I need to do differently to heal that part?
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that's hard for a lot of people because, like you said at the beginning of this podcast, it is a ball of yarn. And it's a ball of yarn that has been tangled and tangled. And then, like, cats played with it, and like elephants trampled on it. And then, like, a steamroller went over it. And then, like, someone ripped it to shreds and then tried to put it together. And
Yeah.
then now you just have this, like, disgusting ball of yarn that you're like, I don't even know where to start. And if I pull on this, I'm never going to figure it out. But the truth in my story is that, I had to. Like I had to start pulling it apart. And I wish I had known at the beginning, like how much freedom there is on the other side, because it
Yeah.
feels scary and it feels daunting to learn things about ourselves or to learn about why we are the way we are. But it's also necessary and good for us. And it's something that we deserve too. Like, like you deserve to be someone who can be present for your life and isn't in like a fully
Fight or flight.
fight or flight, dissociative, like
Yeah.
you don't have to live like that. And I think for so many of us, that's been our norm our whole lives that we don't even realize it's possible to live in a way where it doesn't feel like there's a lion always chasing you or there's danger that you're trying to get away from at any
Right.
given time. That does exist. And it's hard to know that if you haven't experienced that.
Right. And that's a big part of your memoir too, is like recognizing when you've been in survival mode and
Yeah.
realizing that you no longer have to be. Let's talk a little bit about what you do have to face with some of your childhood trauma, because you have a very contentious relationship with your mother that you're very honest about. Towards the end of your memoir, you seem to be in a better place. I really appreciated your note to her in the acknowledgement section. Talk to me about what it meant for her to give you permission to write so honestly about your childhood with her and your experience with her once you became a mother too.
I grew up with a single mom who had undiagnosed and untreated mental health disorders. And it was in the 90s when like people weren't talking about mental health. People weren't talking about childhood trauma. It wasn't normalized to go to therapy. And, to add a layer of poverty on top of that and her own trauma, which I didn't fully recognize until later in life. I also ended up in my own healing journey coming to a place of saying, well, it's no wonder. Not only no wonder am I the way I am because of my childhood, but it's no wonder that I was raised the way I was raised based on hers. And that was a 10-year journey. I say that in like 1 minute in a podcast, but that took a long time. It took a lot of anger. Before there was anger, it was just a sense of responsibility that I had to keep her happy. I felt like my main job as a child was to keep her okay and to make her okay. And I even felt a sense of like pride over that. Like I felt good to be able to like be an adult and be responsible and be seen as mature and all of those things. And I took that into adulthood and into many of my other relationships in my work life and my motherhood and even became a mom and was still doing everything I could to save my mom and to be her savior and to be her emotional support person and to be there for her. It wasn't even like a cognitive, I'm her daughter, so I should. It was infused into me. Like there was no other option. If I got a text with a hint, I took 7 steps forward on how am I going to solve this problem. I didn't even need to be asked. It was infused into me. And yet I would find myself saying yes, making that assumption, rearranging the chairs around the dining room table at Christmas to make sure everyone's moods were okay. Hosting multiple Christmas dinners, one for mom, one for dad, because I didn't want to, like, I would just like do all of these things. I would exhaust myself and then I would snap at my kids.
Yeah.
When we were then alone, I'd snap at my husband. I would be a shell of myself all so that I could, keep everything
Perform
okay.
filial
Perform.
piety. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it wasn't until I went to therapy thinking, oh, this is for postpartum depression that I finally heard the word boundaries. And I remember the first time my therapist brought up my parents, I thought, what does that have to do with it? Like, that has nothing to do with why I feel guilty taking time for myself. My mom has nothing to do with why I'm an exhausted mom. I'm an exhausted mom because I'm not sleeping or because of XYZ. I didn't see the connection or how much energy that relationship was draining from me.
Right.
And it took a long time to see how it was really draining me and to try and figure out what it means to have boundaries and not just have boundaries, but maintain them. That's what we don't talk about. Like we can talk about having boundaries till the cows come home, but it's like the pushback in the moment. It's the like little minutia of decisions that are exhausting. And so
Yeah.
all of that to say, like I was in a pretty codependent, enmeshed relationship for a long time. And I share in the book that we eventually, we went no contact for a while. And in that time, a couple things happened. Number one, I was able to like be released from this need to be that main person and to not feel responsible for her entire well-being and happiness and health and everything. And that was freeing. There was a lot of grief as well, but it was freeing to not feel that sense of responsibility. And eventually, once I had done a lot of healing myself and started to have more compassion for myself, I was eventually able to look at her through a different lens as well. And so when it came time to write the book, my editor, when I was writing, I remember being like, I don't know what to write or how to write it or what I should say or not say. And she said, write as if no one's going to read it and then edit as if they will.
Ooh, I love
And
that.
so that's what I did. And I wrote a lot of things. And I mean, the stories I share maybe are shocking, maybe are difficult. It's a drop in the bucket.
And you can tell that as the reader, you're like, there's more to this.
Yeah, it's enough to give you a picture, but there's a lot of things I don't say.
Yeah.
And so that made it a little bit easier to write, knowing, there's a lot of things I could say that I'm not saying. I'm sharing the things I'm sharing to give you a picture and to take you on the journey, not
To villainize your mother.
I'm not writing this to villainize her. I'm not writing it to hurt her. I'm not writing it out of revenge. I'm writing it because it's true and it's real and it's my story. And knowing the specificity in my life will hopefully help you look at the specificity in yours.
Yes.
And when I gave the manuscript to her to read, I warned her and I told her, like, there's going to be some hard things in here. And just know that my purpose is not to hurt you. I said, I know it will hurt. And the whole point is to help other women, to help other mothers in their own healing journey. And I hope that you can see that. That's what I did.
And at that point, you guys had walked back the no contact because, like you said, you
Yeah.
were in a place where you could have a healthier relationship with her
Yeah.
from on your end. And it seemed like your mom, she did some work too.
She has been doing the work. And I will say, when I say I was able to look at her with more compassion, there's so many things that can be true at the same time. I can have compassion and also have an arm's length. And
Yeah.
I've learned that it's not only okay, but it's necessary sometimes to have an arm's length. And so those boundaries were easier to set once I had set the biggest boundary, right? Like once I had gone no contact and I have had totally gone there. Once I came back, boundaries that once made me want to peel my skin off to say just felt like, okay, just that's something we don't talk about. And they're so much easier. And I think so much easier for her to accept as well. There's no such thing as a perfect relationship. There's also no such thing as a permanent relationship. They're always evolving. Different things can happen that could change the dynamics of things. But yeah, by the time I shared the manuscript, we had been in contact again, but have a completely different relationship now.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy, and I know it's not easy for her to know that I've written these things and shared them publicly. And, she's also shared that she is proud of me and is all for the mission of helping other people to heal. And, she's doing her work. And so it's not a fairy tale ending. This might make it seem like a fairy tale ending. There's like hope, and it's an ongoing process.
Were you hopeful that she would change and you could have a relationship with her?
My issue with hope is that I'm afraid of it.
Mm,
Especially when you've been in a toxic relationship for so long and you've allowed yourself to feel hope before, and you've been disappointed or you've been hurt or you've been stabbed in the back, or XYZ has happened after you allowed yourself to feel hope. You then feel even more disappointed. You feel stupid. You feel all these different things. That's like, oh, of course that happened. Why did I trust him again? Why did I let myself feel hope? Feeling hope can be scary. It's a balance, right? It's like hope is necessary because we can't just give up hope, but you cannot just like endlessly allow yourself to be like an open wound that salt can be poured into at any given moment. Every relationship is different. And so I was really intentional with how I wrote what I wrote about going back to my mom and having a relationship with her and sharing my compassion, because everyone's story is different. My relationship with my mom is different as a child and now to yours, to another person's. And for some people, that no contact is permanent. And that's a
yeah.
totally different grief. And for other people, it's temporary. And so it's like we're all on this different journey. And I don't want anyone to ever think that because I was able to go back, then that's what the expectation is. That like the goal of going no contact isn't definitely to go back. It's to figure out what is healthy and good for you and to
Right.
navigate what to do next. It's going to be different for every person, and there's no right or wrong because every person's also on their own journey. And if other people aren't willing to do the work, then you have to do what you need to do to protect yourself. And there's a whole other grief that comes with that.
Definitely. You talk a lot about these things that I think a lot of women have started to talk about mental load, right? Juggling all these things. And it sort of feels like, all right, we've all acknowledged this stuff. We've all talked about it. We know about the mother wound. What do you think we need to do as a society to actually create the larger change?
Oh, that is a huge
I
question.
know. I'm so sorry to spring this on you.
I mean, I wish I had the answers. I think step one is men need to enter the chat, not just to change in their households, but to enter the conversation and to normalize carrying more of the mental load and creating workplaces that don't just exhaust and burn mothers out. And, men to step up and taking care of their aging parents. So it's not always their sister or their wife or their whatever. And, men to change and then also to contribute to the conversation.
Have you had men read your memoir and have you had feedback from men?
I actually had so one of my best reviews on Goodreads is from a man. I'm like, can we just like put this on a billboard? It is. I'm like, my editor sent it to me. It was the only review she sent to me. She was like, you have to read this. I'm like, damn, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's that. I also had a male follower. I was going to a book tour stop in Fredericton. I was at the airport and a guy came up to me and was like late 20s. Was like, I've been a fan. I followed you for years. And I was like, what, you sure that's me? Like I didn't think. And he was like, oh yeah. And like introduced me to his wife and we had a whole conversation. And so like kudos to the men who are in the conversation. And it would be so great if it was normalized that more did. It's so nuanced. I feel not I feel, I know that our own trauma and coping mechanisms are also directly tied to letting go of the mental load, right? Like I have done so much healing. And even now, I've done healing and our marriage has changed. And still, The doctor calls me first. The school calls me first. Everybody calls me first. I got an email from my kid's teacher yesterday reminding me that I didn't pay for something for my kid to go to a trip. My husband wasn't on that email.
Yeah.
And so the systems around us need to change. And also we need to be able to let go of our internalized, whether you want to call it patriarchy, misogyny, our own like, oh, this reflects on me. We have this like, oh, if people come over and the house is messy, it's a reflection on me, not on him. It's like, that may
Yes.
be true. Can you let go of caring about that?
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you let go of caring what people think, knowing that it actually doesn't matter and it is equally his responsibility?
Yeah.
Can you let go of how things are done the perfect way? There's some things that do have to be done a certain way. And like, you can come to an agreement in your marriage about that. There's other things that as women, we do just hold on to because we're so used to holding on to it all because of our own coping mechanisms and wanting to be in control and wanting to feel safe and wanting to whatever. And so there's
Yeah.
no one answer. I think we all need to heal from our trauma. We need to change the entire system and men need to enter the
Burn
chat.
it
So
all
easy
down.
peasy. By 2027, we'll be all tickety-boo.
Love it. Oh, Livy, I have so enjoyed this conversation. And seriously, listeners, I cannot recommend this book enough. Even if you are not a mother, like Libby just said, we need men to join the chat. But truly, it's about just becoming the person living the life that you deserve to live. Yes, sometimes I think as women, our children hold that mirror up to us in ways that maybe not being mothers, it doesn't happen maybe as fast or as obviously, but all of us can stand to excavate and switch that question from what's wrong to what happened to me. Libby, before I let you go, I have three questions that I ask all my
Okay.
authors. First, what is your favorite word?
This is a really hard question.
Yeah.
Actually feels like one of my favorite words, which seems super ridiculous and lame. I wanted to come up with something more literary, but actually is one of my favorite words because I feel like it cuts through the noise
Mm.
of, I don't know, the BS so many people say. Like, we're not just being honest, we're being actually honest. Or like when you meet someone and you're like, hey, how are you? How are you actually? That's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
It's a different question. Oh, I'm good. How are you? How are you actually? Oh, XYZ happened. There's something about that word that's just like, I feel like cracks us open a little more
Hmm.
and also can be hilarious in the right context. My husband's British. And so there's like different ways. It's great. It's a great word.
Yes. It can be kind or it can be a little like sassy,
Yeah, you can
which
use it so many different ways. It's
you
great.
really
I asked
can.
ChatGPT what my favorite word should be, and the first word it told me was honest, and I was like, that's lame. It's not honest. And the
Damn it,
second
chat.
word, yeah, and then I asked it and it was like fucking.
I thought maybe when you paused, I thought you were gonna say fuck because you throw a
Yes.
few of them in your memoir, which I appreciate a good fuck.
Yeah. It was like, well, it's an exclamation mark and it's an emphasizer. And I was like, I can't say that. I don't know that that's it. So it's either honest, fucking, or actually.
Love it. Fucking honest, actually. Let's all be
Yeah.
fucking honest, actually. I
Oh,
love
I
that.
like it. I like that. It's the
There we
name
go.
of my next book, actually.
Yes. Okay, question two. How do you stay hopeful today?
I stay hopeful by focusing on how it feels to be present with what's in front of me right now,
Mm.
which sounds kind of hokey, but I've spent my whole life being either in fight or flight or dissociated or thinking about my past or what's coming or what I can control. And I've noticed my ability to just be where I am. And that feels like the biggest blessing of my entire life and an existence that I never knew existed before.
Mm.
And it gives me hope because I think if I can do it, other people can do it. And if other people can do it, then maybe the world is not going to hell in a handbasket.
Yes. I do find that when I just stay present, the anxiety of the future goes away and like the guilt of the past goes away because presently I'm just talking to a fucking incredible woman, actually. And that's a pretty good place to be.
Pretty sweet. It's pretty cool. Humans are pretty cool.
We can be. Babes in Bookland question jar. Ooh, what's something you're weirdly competitive about?
I am weirdly competitive about sports. And it's weird because I am the worst athlete on the planet. Like, I'm
Okay.
really bad at soccer, beach volleyball, like any sport. I am at any given time probably the worst person on the team, but I feel so passionate about trying my best and beating everyone and being proud of everyone else on my team who is doing the good work. It's weird.
I love that. I bet you're killer at a game night.
Oh yeah, I'm a lot. It's a lot to be around me on a game night.
Okay. Oh, Libby, thank you so much. We can find you at Libby Ward, LIBBYWARD, on all the socials.
On all the socials. I mean, TikTok is Libby Ward official because apparently somebody else had Libby Ward.
How
But I
dare
mean,
they?
just type my name into the internet and it'll find the places.
That's
Libby
right.
Ward is where you'll find me.
And pick up her memoir and then find her on socials for more just uplifting, humorous, connective content on the daily. Libby, thank you again so much for coming on the podcast. This was such an incredible conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, love. Have a great day.
Yep, you too. Bye.
Bye. And thank you all so much for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed this conversation, please rate and review it wherever you podcast and share it with a friend. That's the easiest way to support Babes in Bookland. Next week, we have something that I think is pretty fun. My friend Brett stops by the podcast. It's a book club chat, 3+ books. We're digging into the annotated autobiography of Laura Ingalls Wilder. It's called Pioneer Girl. So, of course, we're also going to be discussing the Little House on the Prairie series, but we're adding in a fun, buzzy fiction novel that everyone's been talking about yesteryear. I can't wait to bring it your way. Until then, take care.